let's transition to the first panel of this session. So I'll call up the panelists. First is Dr. Racine Lee, Director of Data Management at Digital Products and Technology at Academia 2063. Thank you. Next is Dawit Philippos, Chief Operating Officer of Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Institute. Thank you. Then Dr. Kennedy Senagi, Data Management Modeling and Geoinformation Unit, International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, also known as ICIPE. Okay, thank you. And myself, Tim Brown, I'll be serving as the moderator. Thank you. So maybe we can warm up a little bit here. Racine, can you tell us about what is Agriculture 5.0 and what was 4.0 and 3.0 and so on?
Thank you, Tim. That's not a warm-up, that's the game, actually. Thank you so much. So thank you for having me. Maybe I will step back a little bit in history and see how we can explain this from my perspective. If we go back to 1995, it's a long time ago for me, where what we call today the browser or the navigator, Netscape, they published their first initial public offering for the commercial internet, right? And since then, everything has changed in the market, and even the whole economy has transformed. For example, those who were selling information, they found themselves in a competing position. And those who relied on being known, they seized the opportunity to do so. What I'm trying to stress here is that when we have a revolution, the biggest impact should be expected in areas that were not traditional users of that technology. We used to have movie rentals, now we have Netflix. We used to have paper-made agendas, now we have digital calendars. So let's take that fact and apply it into historical facts for agriculture. Yesterday we saw at the show that agriculture is traditionally labor, physical labor, right? And that is agriculture 1.0. After an unfortunate event, World War I, we use a lot of mechanics there, right? So the impact in the agricultural sector is the mechanization. World War II, a lot of chemicals. And if you project that in the agricultural sector, it's also where we start adopting a lot of inputs, fertilizers, and so on. That's not the beginning of fertilizers, but the widespread of adoption. Now we get into bioengineering. And there, the impact in the agricultural sector will be when you start having drought-tolerant crops, or you start having like crops that are, resistant to like pest and disease. Now we have digital innovations, and we have like all of the accompanying artifacts, such as like increased computational power, increased storage, and all the information we collected from the previous revolutions, and all of that is the convergence that is called Agriculture 5.0. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for teeing that up. So I think we've all seen different kinds of toy applications, e-cow, where you put a little tag on the cow's ear and somehow track it, applications that maybe allow you to share and rent tractors and things like that. But many of these are very small-scale, one-off kind of applications here. What's really important here is agriculture is the #1 employer in Africa. And so this has to go beyond a few one-off things to something that's affecting millions, even billions of people. And so, so that's the issue of scaling. Kennedy, would you maybe say a few words about maybe some of the challenges with scaling, or how we should be thinking about scaling in the agricultural sector?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I just look at scaling is, I may say, is the systematic way of adopting a technology so that it can be used by as many people as possible in the agricultural sector, in this case. Some of the challenges that come up when adopting a technology could be, in my view, having trained the people who are adopting this technology to understand how to use it and how to apply it effectively so that they can actually see the outcomes or the results. The other challenges could be looking at the social economical status of the society, also the cultural practices. For example, at ISIPE, we deal with insects. So I'm trying to think of a technology like that can be scaled, like farming insects. There's some cultures, or I may say societies, that don't believe in farming insects. So yeah, it can be very hard to adopt such kind of technology in such kind of society. There could be many other factors, including even the administrative boundaries and even the administrative policies. You could have come up with the technology, but before it's approved by the necessary stakeholders, like the government, then it becomes not possible to adopt it and scale it up. Even the boundaries, as I mentioned, you have come up with the technology to, let's say, in the wildlife, because there are pests that affect, that pass diseases to wildlife. But look at the wildebeest when they cross over to Tanzania. So it becomes hard to control and scale up the technologies when they go into the other boundaries, since you need to first of all negotiate with other governments so that they can also adopt the same technology. Yeah, so I have a list of many technologies, but just I'll stop there so that the conversation can go on. Thank you.
That's right. So scaling up is, there's a number of challenges here in terms of, I mean, we can repeat from the earlier speaker, the farmers have to be aware of it, has to be accessible, has to be affordable, but there's cultural barriers, there's regulatory, there's governmental barriers to getting things deployed. But fundamentally, when we're talking about scaling, it's about getting these solutions out there. And so I heard a speaker earlier in the conference talking about their solutions, and we really want to make those solutions with lots of knobs so people can get in and use these the way they want. But I think actually in many cases, especially in the agricultural sector, the people involved, the solution designers, may not actually be IT experts, and then the intended users, if we're thinking smallholder farmers, they're not IT experts. They just want something that works, right? They just want, like, I need it to do this, and they want to pull it out. So Dawit, maybe you could say a few words about something that you've been working on that has that characteristic. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. So I'll be speaking in the context of Ag 5.0, probably because we're talking about digital agriculture. Something interesting that I could mention to this panel is that, like, in the organization that I'm working, we're working on this IVR SMS system, where farmers will be provided with agronomic information depending on what specific requirement they have. For instance, you can provide information based on if it is, a planting season, what kind of planting information is required for the farmers, and you can push through the IVR SMS system to the farmers. Or a different kind of agronomic information is required by the farmers. Accordingly, you can customize the system and upload to the system. And once again, you can extend it to the farmers based on their requirements. So one thing we need to be mindful about in here is, like, this is something we have done for the agriculture, but this same thing could be customized to cover other sectors, like could be education, health, or other government. So in a way, we can, this has got very much the attributes of a DPG, So we can scale it to that level, and these government-centric services could be provided through that.
So that's great. So that's nice, right? We can think of DPGs as playing a role of taking solutions and that are designed in one place, but can be reused over and over, so that we can get a lot of value out of it that way. We were talking earlier about how the one challenge is often people build systems and they maybe are coming from outside of the agricultural sector, and they just sit in their dorm room and come up with a great solution, but they don't necessarily know best practices actually in the field. Do you have any examples where you have DPGs that, or sorry, IT type applications where there was some learning along the way about, like, you deployed it, you figured out that it wasn't working well for some reason, but maybe you started to apply some lessons learned and you were able to integrate that back in the solution? Does anybody have an example of that they would like to? I see some nodding heads. So Kennedy, yes.
Well, not really an IT, if you allow me. It's an agricultural solution, but falls within the umbrella of digital public goods. There's this technology, just an example, of where we all know that maize farming, maize is the staple food crop in Kenya. So there's this pest called the fall armyworm. It really affects, it ravages maize up to a loss of 60%. So how is that solved? So ICIPE came up with a technology through our scientists that if you plant Napier grass around the farm, taking note that many farmers are smallholder farmers. They have an acre, 2 acres, up to 5 acres. So if you plant Napier grass within that farm, it's seen that the fall armyworm will go and lay its eggs on Napier, but these eggs will not hatch and they'll not be transformed to larvae. So that's one way of controlling the fall armyworm. To extend that, there is also this grass called the Napier grass. Not Napier, sorry, the Desmodium, where when you plant maize and have Desmodium planted in between there, so the Desmodium will control some weeds, so the maize will not be choked by the weeds, so they'll grow well, and at the same time you'll manage your pests using Napier, and with that you'll have high production of maize, and the Desmodium can be fed by the cattle. So this is a kind of technology, if I may say, that can be adopted. It's a digital public good to be adopted by the government and many others. Yeah, so that's just an example. Yeah.
So that's a nice example where it's not just software apps, these kind of things. It's best practices that can be developed in relevant to the local region. That's perhaps low cost and so on. Do people have other examples? I saw you sort of nodding a little bit as well. I think that's your raison d'être.
Yeah, it's something that we try to develop at Academia 2063. It's a platform that we built for cooperatives, smallholder cooperatives, to have more shares in the transaction along the value chain. Because usually what they do is that they sell their production and afterwards they don't see all the other transactions that are happening along the value chain. And we did a research project and we called it the business credibility intermediation. And there basically is that you will have farmers will, I heard it, I think it's like top-down approach service. There will be the farmers, then you will have a public or private entity in the middle, and then up there you will have like the market operators, the like finance services, and then you have the export firm and so on. So all of them, they will just accept to collaborate with the cooperative only because we have those private and public entities in the middle. So they're sending the signal that actually it's safe and lucrative to come and work with this cooperative. So how do we take out those barriers? That way smallholders can start having, you know, those shares. Now we develop the platform and then we create clusters. One is like e-learning for technology providers to come and collaborate with smallholders. And we also develop like the financial, the market, the e-marketing. But something that we forgot actually is the organizational skills that we need actually to develop for those cooperatives. How do they manage their members? How do they make sure they track the transactions? And then they have proof of delivery, they have proof of payments and all of that. So it's not per se a best practice, but I think if we incorporated those cooperatives at the beginning of building that DPG, it will be much easier actually to take that into account. So we missed like one aspect of that triangle. Yeah.
I think that's a lesson that, again, people can easily overlook this need. Really the technology is not the solution, it's the people that are using it. And so we need to know how to manage that. And so, you know, capturing these kind of lessons is maybe another area where DPGs can play a role if we have some way of doing that. I don't know the answer for how to do that, but I just want to have us think more broadly that you know, what could be a DPG. It's there's a digital part of it, which is which we're talking about, but there's also a practice, and there's maybe different kinds of repositories that could be capturing these kinds of lessons. And it, you know, I'm sure there was something like when you were done, it's like, I sure hope nobody else makes that mistake. You wish there was a way to, you know, to make sure that they capture that. So we've talked about scaling in terms of taking solutions and then applying them over and over again. That's one kind of scaling. We've talked about another kind of scaling where we try to collect lessons learned so that these experiences can be used. Kennedy, when we were talking earlier, you were talking about maybe another kind of scaling, which is how do we use DPGs as a platform to bring in more solutions providers, different kinds of solution providers than we usually think about.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of, at ICIPE we have a central repository where we manage data. So we request scientists when they're done with data, you know, scientific data extraction, I mean knowledge from data, so they need to make this data public, so it becomes a digital public good. So through that, then other innovators can come and, you know, extend science on that, develop better tools or better methodologies or such kinds of things. So the data becomes open, it's open data for other players to come and look at it from a different perspective and develop new tools from that. Yeah, so we have a data warehouse that is public.
So, so one way is putting the data out there, putting these models out there so others can use it. So who should be coming up with like the best way to use this data, or who's the right person to do that?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm the one who manages data in the institution. So my goal is to ensure that this data is of quality. Quality, there are many riders that come with quality, including timeliness, consistency, and many others, you know. So once the data is of quality and it's on the public domain, and the main PIs, the principal investigators, have maximally extracted the scientific findings from that data, then it becomes open. So, and by open, I'll be presenting later on. I think after this, I'll be showing some of the practices that were put in place to ensure that this data is open, it complies to universal standards, so that it's reusable and science can be extended from that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So maybe before I continue, is there maybe a comment or question from the audience that they would like to bring forward about this issue of scaling and in these agricultural settings? Yes.
Well, it fits well, but so in all this technology that we are doing, and in the health sector, we touch upon this. So where is, when we collect and we use local knowledge? I mean, by interacting with farmers in Senegal, we realize that they know a lot. And so in your experience, how do you make use of that to support the science, actually, and the technology? I mean, how do you do that? And I mean, did you happen to have experience on that?
Comments about bringing in solutions from farmers or other users? Yeah. Go ahead and then, yeah, you can start.
I think he said Senegal. I have to say something. So yeah, but actually we are not enough getting closer to the farmers when it comes to developing those products. And usually what is going on is there's a lot of let's say overuse of secondary data or third-party data, remote sensing data, satellite images when it comes to developing and delivering products to the smallholders or the farmer. So from my perspective where I work, usually we use data and analytics to support decision making. But decision at the policy level or at the farm level is a decision, even though the impact is different. For policymakers, usually it's documented what they usually need, what they want, and what are the issues. So therefore, once we develop our products, it's like easier. But for the farmer, actually, you have to go on the ground and really work with them. I think that's the next hurdle, from my perspective, that we really need to focus on. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't know who is doing it. A proxy that we are using is like ISRA, which is like the National Institute of Agricultural Research. They are like doing a lot of groundwork with them. And so they collect also a lot of information that they get from them. But I think from the development perspective and let's say the research side, beyond collecting data only for like modeling purposes, for example, it can be interesting to go and sit with them and have that empirical knowledge they have. And that can inform a lot of what we are doing, even improving it for them and for the policymakers at the same time. Yeah, over.
So just to add to that, previously my colleague Dr. Kennedy was mentioning about the fall armyworm. So how we have leveraged the IVR SMS system, and thereby I just want you to see how the collaboration with the farmer gave us an option to produce a solution to whatever has happened in the field. So during that incident, it's not us who actually identified there is a fall armyworm in the field. It's the farmers. They identified it in the field and they asked for a solution. So that was not something we were aware of, but having that information, we went to the field, assessed what actually the issue is. So once we identified that one, engaging, all the relevant professionals and what the symptoms are, we have uploaded a solution or an information into the IVR SMS system so that every farmer within the system will be able to know when a certain incident of the sort indicated by the farmers is in the field, it's a fall armyworm. So accordingly, they can prescribe, the necessary corrective mechanisms for that. So that way, it's the collaboration that gives you come up with a solution, not the digital or the software system alone.
Did you want to add to that, Kennedy? Yes.
Yeah, so I'll just give an example to that on how I've seen some of our scientists go around it. I'll give an example in insects for food. Those people from DRC, I understand they feed on insects a lot. So there's a case where we went to collect a sample of an insect in DRC so that we can bring it to the laboratories so that we can build a colony and see how to scale that, to be maybe industrialized. So the scientists went, collected the sample, brought it to the lab. As you know, an insect has 4 phases. So there is the flying phase of it. Then there's the egg laying, so they become eggs. Then they hatch to become the larvae. And then from the larvae, they go into the pupa, right? So at the natural scene, that works very well. It plays out very well without a doubt. And the DRC people are able to collect these insects from the trees and feed on them. But in the lab setting, the cycle went on very well until it got to the pupa, and that pupa refused to move into the flying phase of it. So the scientists sat there for months. It's not working. Now he had to go back to the natural setting and talk to the local people, see how they do it. Then after that, now he was able to understand the parameters, a bit of them, but he has not been able to crack that in the laboratory. So yeah, that's how we work with farmers to understand how they do things traditionally and how that can be translated into now a scientific experiment and scale that to, scale it to being industrialized and having more food out of that, yeah. Yeah.
So, talking to the farmers, yes. So, I think DPGs can kind of cut 2 ways on this. On one hand, if we have standardized ways to build apps, then it has this advantage that farmers, like every time somebody builds, let's say, some sort of app, the farmer doesn't have to relearn the interface. So even though they might be apps for different companies and different products, if they have a similar look and feel, and maybe there's a payment system that works, that they're familiar with, that works with that, then the farmer can perhaps, once they've gone through the learning curve of one app, there's another app that's very similar that maybe is for a different service, but if it's similar enough in look and feel, it's not a new learning curve for them. Okay, so that's sort of the positive side, but the negative side is maybe a little bit what was being alluded to, is that that doesn't mean that it's one interface for the whole continent, right? Because different parts of the continent may have to have different look and feels that make sense. And so on one hand, it can provide uniformity, and it's a common platform to build that, but also you need to know how to differentiate them for different different markets, because we know that there's different cultural barriers and so on that can prevent adoption. So maybe just to change and talk a little bit about a different topic. So I thought Vineet's talk was very interesting because he was indicating how they were trying to integrate data that was collected by the farmers and provide a mechanism for that, but also combine that data with other kind of data that's available, and try to create these packages of not just the farmers' data, but the farmers' data and these other sources. And I think we could take that to a logical extreme, that you could go to an individual farm and then you should be able to collect farmers' data, past productivity data, all the weather data associated with that, historical weather data, future weather data, satellite images, any drone images, are there nearby sensors, water, everything you should be able to collect, if we take that to a logical extreme. Is that sort of just a crazy dream? Is there any applications you can actually imagine for that? What would be a role of DPGs? Any thoughts on that kind of vision? What could we do with that? Yeah. I think that's, maybe I'll even look at you, Racine. Isn't that sort of your business?
No, actually, it's not that easy, because you can go on the farm, try to collect previous agricultural production, you might not find the same owner as last year. And also sometimes you might not find that person there, or they even don't know what was the production last year. Or for that crop, they changed it from last year to now. So therefore, it doesn't prevent you to collect the data now still for your work. But I think one sort of application as a DPG, I would love to see, for example, an application on the phone where, you know, there's that project called like crop type classification we're working on. The idea is that if you look at the satellite images on croplands, everything is green, either maize or everything is green. You might not be able to recognize them. But if you can have, for example, spectral signatures, let's say a signature for each crop and label it, you'll be able actually to build a machine learning algorithm to be able to identify it later. For that, you need labels, right? So what I would like to see is, and contribute, is to have an app where you go to the farm. We already identify where to go, latitude, longitude. The app will guide you to that point and confirm that you arrived based on your precision, because it's important. And don't forget that in Africa we have smallholders. Like in 50 meters you can have 2 plots, so therefore your label can change. So you might want to consider that precision, get there, now have drop-down lists, collect all the information you can, directly convey towards the cloud, and maybe even the analysis done in the cloud. That would be amazing. For now, I've seen like prototypes, but they are like so dispersed, everybody's trying to do its own thing. But if we can like having like homogenized across the continent or even elsewhere, that would be amazing. So that's sort of maybe idea that I have in mind, yeah.
So that's.
I have something to add on that. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so just to expound on what Risin has mentioned, just to make it more accurate. I've seen my colleagues have made part of that project. We're able to develop a cropping pattern mapping system where, of course, each and every crop looks green, but with the GIS technology, we're able to look at the different greenness. Yeah. So through that, the GIS people, there's a way they do it using the NDVI index and all that. So they're able to fetch that data, put it very well clean in an Excel sheet. Since it's well labeled, they can go to the ground and ascertain, this was maize. So it gets out well labeled, ready for machine learning. Then when it's trained, then it can be, we can predict other regions that could be having the same NDVI indexes reflectance. So with this, we're able to know and understand the cropping patterns in a certain region, whether they're planting maize from a distance. You don't not necessarily have to be there. You can understand whether they're cassavas, whether they're avocado, mango trees, and all that. For purposes of if there are infestations of pests, then the extension officers know where to take the remedies. Yeah, so that's one technology that we've been able to release. It's part of the GPGs. Yeah.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Actually, I completely agree with that. But the crop type classification is one part of it. But the DPG side I'm looking at is, for example, growing maize in Rwanda might have one signature, but the maize in Senegal will have a different one. So can we have that tool that can be a bank of signatures that might help you to identify crops depending on agroecological zones? So I think that itself is a DPG. It's a kind of data set that can serve several purposes. And I think we might talk later though. I'm interested into that, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, these are all good points about that there's a lot of individual activities and finding ways to pool what we're pool together what we're learning, but also even it also has the effect that if you made that sort of public repository of these kind of signatures, it also even attracts and invites people to add to that, right? Right now, there's no sort of global way for you to invite people to create these signatures. But having these DBT repositories, then people see it, and then people somewhere in the world are saying, oh yeah, we're working on these kind of things, and then they can add and so on. So that's another sort of value here, right? That it provides, it's also almost an advertisement of opportunities to contribute, right? It's not just an end result, it's even a step in the solution. So we've talked a few times about the value chain and market data. You know, what's really the role of that for farmers? Maybe Dawi, you could say a few words about that.
So maybe I just want to touch a little bit about the DPG component. Earlier, the keynote speaker mentioned about the farm stack application, right? So within that farm stack application, it's already dubbed as a DPG. You can complement by contributing like any application that makes that system robust or any data that could be accessible to whosoever wants it. Just to give you an example of the kind of data that could be included into the system is we have like mapped out a national soil information system in Ethiopia where the different agroecologic zone, depending on what kind of crop suitability is in there. So you will be able to tell if you go to a certain area within the region, that specific area is suitable for a certain type of crop. So you can easily integrate that one because you already have registered farmers within the system that will be able to make use of that specific information. That way it can help, you know, a certain group of farmers, and you can extend this into a regional level or to an extent a global level, depending on, you know, like how climate smart agriculture is incorporated into the system. So that way it can go or it can develop into a DPG. Specifically coming to the point, we have also implemented another solution called National Market Information System. So once you already have such systems in place, you will be able to take advantage of those data that are already in place, that are available freely. For instance, a farmer on a certain geographic region may be producing a certain type of crop. So that specific farmer may not be able to tell the exact price of that specific commodity at a given time. So this national market information system provides a way to inform the farmers what the market prices are based on, the market data collected across the regions or within the country. Could be from like 200 or 300 different markets, and you will tell, say, on a specific period, the price of wheat or the price of maize is so and so. So the farmers will get a reasonable price for whatever they produce, and that way I think this can help.
Yeah, I mean, this is a long-standing problem for rural farmers, which is they're often price takers. Somebody discounts and gives them a price, and they have no choice to take it or leave it. And so giving them some market power to negotiate is useful. So, you know, one of the ultimate computers in this world, right, is evolutionary computing, and you know, the elements of that is the genomes in our cells, and so you know, one of the hot topics these days is GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and so, you know, what's happening with GMOs? I think I heard something recently in Nairobi, maybe, or in Kenya. Sorry, maybe you could say just a few words, Kennedy. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So recently, the government of Kenya has lifted the ban on GMOs. Yeah, so that's the new hot topic in the agricultural sector in Kenya right now. So it's bringing up a lot of conversation, criticism, and all this, whether it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. Yeah, but scientifically we know GMOs are modified. Yeah, they could be seeds mostly, so they tend to have a better resistance against pests. or we can get more production out of, you know. But the question here is it a good or bad thing? So yes, I can say it's a good thing if it's regulated. So those are my views. So with proper regulations, not like a floodgate for any GMO that is not certified or not, you know. So it should be regulated in a way, and so that it's of benefit to the whole country. You're interested in having more food, yeah, the crops not being destroyed by pests, and many other challenges that come with farming. Yeah, or even resistance to climate. We have a lot of issues in climate change. So, yeah, those are my views on that.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I think one of the challenges, though, is that GMOs are often used as a tool of exclusion by many of the large agricultural companies. You either buy their seeds, and then once you buy their seeds, you're sort of the whole region can be polluted now because they cross-cultivate with other people's seeds, and suddenly they're saying, you know, you can't grow this crop and that crop anymore. And so you know, somewhere in there, I think there's a challenge for all of us to think about, is there some sort of database or approach to working with GMOs? Is there maybe a public sector, if you will, GMOs that can be developed and tracked and sort of avoid this issue of somehow you buy a few Monsanto seeds and then next thing you know, nobody can grow corn in that area without paying Monsanto something because of you know, crossbreeding and so on. So I think there's a role there. So we've talked about the scaling up, the uses of data. Perhaps I'll give the audience one last chance for a question here. Yes, I see a question here. Yeah, go. I think it was on.
So sorry about that. So my question is related to scaling. So I'd be interested to know what methodology or criteria that's used to decide whether or not to scale a particular product or system. And if you have any, just that, and methodologies related to scaling, any frameworks that are used. So that it can be predictable in terms of one product to the next to the next.
In the agricultural sector, right? Yeah. Any comments on that? Okay, go ahead, David.
So maybe in terms of like the system, if your question is related to that, so most of the systems that are developed, for instance, the one I mentioned, the IVR-SMS system is a modular system. So at any point in time, whenever there is a requirement, as far as it meets that specific standard, you can add a certain module. For instance, previously it was meant to push an information to the farmers only. So when the case of this fall armyworm came in, we used that same system to include this specific information. And eventually, learning from this one, what other application that we have that was integrated to the system was like a surveying application. Within that same IVR-SMS system, we have integrated another system that helps us to do a survey, and we integrated it to that as well. So the modular approach we used helped us scale up the system, and that upgraded the scalability of the usability of the system as well.
So I see our time is up here. Thank you, Racine, Dawit, and Kennedy for your comments. I think we've been trying to explore this issue of the role of DPGs in agricultural sector, and I think we've had some discussions here too about some concrete examples of DPGs that might make sense, and I think that's a discussion we'd like to continue because I think there's some real possibilities here, some thinking out of the box about what it means to be a DPG in this sector, and it's beyond just again it's beyond just IT. I think there's a lot of other ways to think about it that we can capture and make a difference in productivity and ability for people to grow and feed here in Africa. So thank you again. Okay.